and I don't know how I'm going to do. I'm going to do it according to the principles that I have laid out for me in Scripture and by a lot of help and advice from others. So I want to conduct this class a little bit differently. I'm expecting some input. All of us here in this class here are parents who have children who are working on these same things. And so I'm going to bring some principles from Scripture, but Scripture does not have specifics for every situation. This subject of raising children has a lot of wisdom throughout Scripture, but there is not a one-size-fits-all plan for all kids. Each child is different, and each child will need to be handled differently. As an example, some children are stubborn, and some children are very malleable. There are some who are, you tell them to go do something, and just because you said it, they're going to challenge you. And some who are very happy to go along. Some children are quick-tempered, and some are soft-hearted. Some are self-motivated, and some need to be given motivation. Some are self-centered, and some are more thoughtful of others. Some children are outgoing, and some are shy. Some are talkative, and some are contemplative. And because children vary as much as you and I vary, we have to handle them and treat them differently. And we're going to work with them at the level that they're at. But what I would begin with is here in Ephesians chapter 6. I want to look at the specific principles that are mentioned concerning raising children. And then after we walk through this passage here in Ephesians 6 and made a lot of comments on it, we'll look at some wisdom that has been handed down to me, and we can discuss those things as well. So my expectation for the class is that as we talk over each of these topics or each of these points, that you guys give me your experiences, your insight, and hopefully together we'll be able to work through this subject a little bit easier. If someone would, let's read Ephesians chapter 6 and in verse 4.
And you, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord.
All right. So the New King James says nurture and admonition. What does your translation say, Prince?
It says, which is ESV, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord.
Thank you. So discipline and instruction. I know you usually read ES or a NASB.
It's the same.
Oh, you're using, so it's the same between.
The American side, but it's the same as that.
Oh, okay, excellent, excellent. I'm going to be using some of the wording from both the New King James and the New American Standard. I think they help bring out these different aspects. The term that's used here of discipline, when you think of your parents disciplining you, what's the first thing you think of?
Thanking.
Oh, okay, so Magia said spanking, Prince did. And as Daniel mentioned in our class a couple of days ago, you got to work on the back end a lot. That's usually what we think of when we think of discipline. But this word, both in Hebrew and in Greek and in English, all carry two different main ideas. And the first one is not the punishment. The first one is actually instructing. We use this term if we talk about martial arts. If I were to ask Prince, what was the discipline of martial arts that you studied? It would be?
I don't understand.
So when we talk about martial arts, yes, martial arts covers all the martial arts. But the discipline you studied is maybe karate, maybe kung fu, maybe it's taekwondo. And so you were under the discipline of kung fu. And so whenever you went to your sensei and you worked with them, they taught you how to move your body, how to react, how to diet, how to exercise. All of that is to discipline you. It's to bring you under a certain set of teachings, a certain instruction that then controls who you are. That's the idea. If we turn over to Proverbs, we'll be looking at a few Proverbs together. Let's look at Proverbs chapter 3 and in verse 11. Proverbs 3 and verse 11.
My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline or be wary of his reproof.
Does God come down and spank us?
No.
There is some correction that he does dish out from time to time, but the idea that is carried in this context is the idea of allowing God to teach, to instruct, to have control over who you are as a person, to instruct how you act and how you react. It is to bring you under his ideology. The same thing comes up in chapter 19. Proverbs chapter 19, and we'll look in verse 27.
Cease to hear instruction, my son, and you will stray from the words of knowledge.
Yes, thank you. Cease, if you cease to hear instruction. What does the New American Standard say in verse 27? 1927.
Cease listening, my son, to discipline, and you will stray from the words of knowledge.
Okay. So we have ceased from listening instruction, and then yours says discipline. So if you stop listening to discipline,
Yeah.
the reason that's the same is it's the same Hebrew word. Instruction and discipline are the same. And it's the same idea. That if you stop listening to someone teaching you, and the whole point that we're bringing this up is that if we only think of discipline in terms of correction, of spankings, then we're missing out on half, if not more than half, of what is actually talked about in Scripture concerning instruction. We'll come back and we'll talk about this instruction of discipline in a moment. But the other aspect of discipline is to be corrected. If you're there in Proverbs, turn back to Proverbs chapter 13, and we're going to look in verse 24. Proverbs 13, verse 24.
Whoever spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him.
All right, so we looked at these two aspects in Proverbs. There's a need for us to discipline our children with instruction, to teach them how to control themselves, how to think, how to act, how to react. But there also needs to be times whenever we correct them with some correction. Some parents have a tendency to only discipline with the rod, and they don't give a whole lot of instruction. And some parents tend to only instruct and feel bad about actually disciplining their child with correction. And as Prince, you just read, what does he say if we do not deal out corrective discipline?
He hates his son.
He hates his son. And yet most parents who are unwilling to correct think that they're doing it because they love them just too much. I love them too much to do this. And Solomon makes the point that if you do not do this, you actually hate your child. Turn over to chapter 23. 23, we'll look at verses 14 and verse 15, or 13, 14, 13 and 14.
Do not withhold discipline from a child. do not withhold discipline from a child. And it went on to say, if you strike him with a rod, he will not die. Verse 14. If you strike him with the rod, you will save him, you will save his soul from Sheol.
Thank you. So now obviously he gives some guidance in verse 13. He's not saying take a rod to him to kill him. But the kind of discipline is a instructive discipline. It's a corrective discipline. He makes the point that this is going to help save his soul from Sheol. So here in Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4, he tells us that we need to discipline our children. This is both instructive and corrective. We need to tell them the right way to go. And when they fail to do that, we need to lay out a corrective discipline to bring them back in the right way. So I have some thoughts on discipline. Let's consider for a few minutes some examples of instructional discipline. I was talking to a mother a few years ago, and she told me that from a very young age, she taught her boys to not just look at girls. And she gave an example. When she went through the grocery line and the supermarket, when she went through Checkers, do you guys have all the magazines that are, do you guys have a magazine row in some of the grocery stores that have all the women who are scantily clad? Immodest.
Yeah, usually when you trade them.
Yes, that's where they have them for ours. And it's pretty customary that as the mom is busy putting all the shopping on the till for the cashier to ring them out, the little children are either looking at the candy or they're looking at the girls. And she said that she spent time all the time going through the grocery line, and she would take her son's head and turn it the other direction. And so as they grew, they knew, if I see this, I look away. This is something that every time I see this immodesty, I turn my head away from it rather than focusing on it. Now, it took her a lot more time to go through the grocery line, constantly having to turn heads all the time as they kept on going back. But her hard work paid off. And her sons are now men who do not just go around staring at women who are immodest. That is a form of training in a positive way. We're going to train the body to do something to lead the heart in the right direction. How many of us sit down and pray with our children, say before bed or before meals?
Sit down and play.
Pray.
Oh, play.
Yeah, I think we do. No, if your parents sat down with you and prayed before a meal, does it feel odd if you sit down and eat and you forget to say a prayer beforehand? It's something that's just ingrained. And so we have this habit that we teach our children to remind them of this. This is a positive instructional discipline for them. How about parents who train their kids to get up on Sunday mornings, to go to services, to sit still, to pay attention, and to maybe even take notes? Yeah, there's a lot of parents who don't. They're happy for their children just to do whatever, and sometimes we're just happy for them to sit still. But there's a time that you need to instruct them to wake up. As they grow a little older, you have to instruct them to sit. And when they get a little older, you have to instruct them to pay attention. And as they get a little bit older, you instruct them to engage with the lesson by taking notes, by turning to the scriptures in their Bible. All of these things are instructional. All of these things are forming habits in them so that they know how to behave, they know how to act, and it helps them to continue this growth process. Yes.
I just wanted to add as well that I think most of the time, I think what you observe is that you find that I think obviously they're doing it because they're saying to try and get the children to sit still.
Mhm.
They would other parts give them their phone, whereby they could be playing a game, or the worst was when they were watching TikTok.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
So that's a bit, but I think also with that, like it's extended, instead of maybe like saying, doing that, if that phone is taken away, the child puts a, for lack of a better word, a tantrum.
Mhm.
But I think also disciplining children to sit still and pay attention in church doesn't have to happen while the church service is happening. It needs to happen at home,
Mhm.
like whereby they need to be told, like at church, this is what is expected to do. So you need to sit down, you need to pay attention, you need to do this and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And if, I don't know, if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen. So they also understand what the consequences will be. So that when we are there and they are doing that, then that happens, and that it shouldn't be something that I think also just sometimes parents tend to just put these idle threats, say I'll beat you or I'll spank you or something like that.
The zombies are gonna come for you.
Yes, but they never actually follow through. So if you say something, they need to know that okay, if I say something, then I'm really serious. I'm going to say that I'm going to actually do follow through with that thing, and it starts embedding in them to know that okay, this is what I need to do when I'm in worship.
Yes, I've seen this, I think we've all seen this a lot, that instead of parents doing the harder work of teaching them to, to maybe even be bored, distract them with the device. They do this whenever they sit down at dinner, they do this when they're out shopping, they do this when they're at church, and the children do not learn how to function in life because you have tried to make your life easier as a parent by distracting the children with devices. And we need to be teaching this at home, as you said, and then showing this in our own lives at church, and then insisting on this for them because this is going to be good. Okay.
Yeah, if I can add 2 principles on this specific example that I found helpful. Let me give the example in my life. We had trouble with our children sitting still in worship services. And one of the older ladies came to my wife and also spoke to me and said, you will do a lot better if you practice this every day at home. And so for a couple of weeks, we sat all of our children down at a setting kind of like this. And I got up and I gave a short lesson, and we insisted that they follow the rules consistently. And it helped so much. And then we didn't have to do that every day anymore. We could go back to the way we were regularly spending time in devotions in the evening. But so that taught me 2 principles: consistency and daily practice. When they're young, they need that help.
Mhm.
And so and it takes, you're right, it takes a lot of hard work. We have to give it to them.
Another example are parents who teach their children to help out when they see that there is something that needs to be done. There's a time where you have to tell your kids, oh, do you see that person carrying something? They're old, go carry it for them. And then you tell them again the next time, you see that person, go carry that for them. And eventually it becomes, I see someone who needs help, I'm going to go do it. I see dishes in the sink, I'm going to take care of it. I see that there's a mess here in this room, I'm going to clean it. But there's that, as we'll talk about over and over again today, there's this consistency of whenever something needs to be done, I need to point it out. I need to be there to instruct. I need to help. But you get people in this habit. My parents were very diligent about this with me. They thought that boys in particular need to be those who, whenever they see something, they just go and they do it. And my wife has found that to be nice and a little bit unusual. That whenever I see something, I don't really think about it. I just do it because that has been the discipline, or that I have been disciplined to do that. I've been trained to do that. This is something that's maybe more particular to our culture. Whenever we were young, we were always taught to give up our seat for old people. I know that happens here as well. If there's a limited number of comfortable seats, kids, you're young, your muscles don't hurt, your bones don't hurt, you get up. And eventually, whenever old people come in the room, there's this respect that the kids stand up. And it hurts my heart sometimes when I see children who have not been disciplined in this. They have not been trained to do this, and they fail to even learn the basic respect for their elders. Sharing. There are some kids who naturally have a tendency to share, and there are some who I want it first because I want the most. And there's a habit. We need to train them in the way of thinking of what I have to share. What I have is not my gift to hold on to, but it's my gift to then be used for the good of somebody else. Or as we're training our young men in particular to wake up early, to go to work, to put in a full day's work. One of the things that we've been working on with my daughter in particular is to do a job well and not just to do it quickly. For her in particular, this has been a very hard task. She doesn't care if, a lot of times, if something is done well. She just wants it done. And whether it's cleaning, whether it's cooking, whether it's organizing, whether it's her schoolwork, whatever it is, she just wants to do it, and she wants you to be proud of her and happy about it. And when I point out, here's all the things that you have rushed, it just seems to break her, because she wants someone to be proud of her. I have to explain to her, I'm proud of you, but I'm going to be much more proud of you if you put your actual effort into it. Maybe you've seen this, as we have seen this in our country, where younger people are very used to instant gratification. I can get everything that I want immediately. I can have it shipped to my house. I can watch a video right now. And we fail to learn how to do hard work and to do hard work well. That is a discipline where we train the children to do these things, to work hard without grumbling or complaining. And there's so many others we could talk about. On this idea of instructional discipline, we have to give careful thought to what we are training our children to do. As we look at Proverbs 22, Solomon is going to make the point that what we train them to do are going to be habits that are stuck with them for the rest of their lives. Proverbs 22 and verse 6, if someone would.
Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he's old, he will not depart from it.
Do you have the voice of your mother or your aunties or your dad in your head whenever you go to do something? You're going to go do it, and there's this mantra, this idea that goes through your head all the time. I spent a lot of time with my grandfather, and I hear his voice all the time telling me what to do. I'm going to go do something. And he tells me every time I go do it, don't waste a trip. Gather all the stuff now and then go. If you're going to do some work around the house, if you're going to do handyman work, you're going to measure twice and cut once. You're going to do it so that you can present this to somebody. There's all of these sayings that we have in our heads because this proverb is true. What you train them to do, they are going to do. Doesn't mean that they're always going to be perfect. Doesn't mean that they're not going to change later on. But these things stick with them if you work on this. And what happens if we train them to be lazy because we neglect to train them? What if we train them to distract themselves every time they are a little bit bored? What if we train them to complain and to grumble because we haven't taught them to do otherwise? That's going to stick with them for the rest of their lives as well. And maybe hugely importantly, if we don't give thought to what to train them, we have failed to do the exact thing that Paul told us to do in Ephesians chapter 4 and Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4. Let's have a couple thoughts on punishment. We talked about thoughts on instruction, thoughts on punishment. Punishment should meet the crime. Is that a phrase that is familiar?
Mm.
If our child spills some stuff on the floor and they walk away, do I beat them to the point that they can't sit down tomorrow?
No.
Are you sure?
Yes.
I think we understand this. And yet sometimes in the moment, we fail to remember it. And this is one of those things we have to keep in our mind. This is a surefire way to do what Paul tells us not to do in Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4. Do not provoke your child to wrath. If every time your child does something wrong, they receive a very harsh discipline, they're going to feel like there is nothing they can do right. And there's no point trying. And they'll just be angry at us. I know adults who are still struggling with anger at their parents, and maybe even particularly at their father, because the father was harsh and overly punishment, over punishing it. They punished too much. We'll have to change my English. They punished too much for small things. And they punish way too much, maybe even for larger things. Ecclesiastes chapter 8 in verse 11.
Because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of men is fully set to do evil.
Now, the context is dealing with the civil government. But isn't this the same in our families? You know, if now that I'm 39, my father finds out that I did something back when I was 15, and now he wants to spank me, is that going to work? No. And the same thing applies, is that we need to be swift with our punishments. Not so swift that we don't think through what we're doing, but it's something that needs to be concurrent. As we are training, we need to let them know that this thing that they're doing right now is not the right thing for them to do. They need to be able to connect to their actions with the punishment in their mind. I think this is maybe even more important when they're small. As they have a hard time communicating with us with words, sometimes a swift, small correction is what they really need, and they need it right then. If your child was going to go and put their fingers in the outlet, when do you correct them for that? Whenever they're 2 or 3?
Before they get their finger down.
Before. You do it right then, as quickly as possible, because you want them to connect this thing with punishment. You want them to know that this thing is wrong. You don't do it when their dad gets home. You don't do it tomorrow whenever you're in a better mood. And I think that same principle applies. Maybe more so when they're small and there needs to be some immediate things that connect that in their mind. As they grow older and they can reason, then there are some times where you could say, wait until your dad gets home, or I want you to go and think about this, and then we're going to come back and we're going to deal with punishment. But the general principle is still there in Ecclesiastes 8 and verse 11. We looked at a couple of verses already in Proverbs. We looked at Proverbs chapter 23 and Proverbs 13, where it mentions a rod. I think that the rod is both figurative and literal. Sometimes there does need to be some work on the back end. But sometimes the punishment, the correction, is not always a rod. There are other disciplines. And this is one of those things that is in accordance with your child. I'll use an example, and she's not going to watch this, so I hopefully won't embarrass her by this. Our daughter, whenever she received a spanking, did not bend her heart. It did not change her way of thinking. It just made her angry. Now, there were times where it was necessary. And there were times that she did bend her heart, but there was a lot of times where it just incited her to anger. And so we had to change, and we had to find other things. And for a while, it may have been sitting in a corner. And sometimes it had to be, she didn't get to go and do the thing that she wanted to do with her friends that day. And then one of the most effective ones for her was whenever we took away her books and she wasn't allowed to read. Wouldn't have worked on me as a kid, but for her, that meant something to her. The spanking didn't, but removing the books really did. And so as we look at the punishment, we need to recognize that one punishment does not fit all children. My sister, who's also not going to watch this, so I'm not going to embarrass her. I don't know if she just didn't have any nerves on the back end, but it made no effect. It would happen, and she would look at mom and dad and go, okay. And they had to find other things for her. And so when you have to understand your child, and you have to learn them to figure out what is going to be a correction for them. And this is probably going to change over time. Now that Kartu is 17, can you correct him? Can you discipline him the same way that you did whenever he was Booty's age? No. He's too big.
Yeah.
And he thinks differently. And the way that you work through that is going to be a different process for him. And so as your children grow, you need to grow and adapt with them in this discipline. Number 4, it must be carried out for their good and not an expression of your feelings or your anger. James chapter 1 in verse 20. James chapter 1 and verse 20.
120, for the anger of men does not produce the righteousness of God.
Do you know these examples? That you have an auntie or a mother or a father who would only discipline you, only punish you when they got angry enough.
Yeah.
That you could poke and you could poke and poke.
Yeah.
And then if you poke too many times, out of anger, it happens. What are they teaching you to avoid? Is it the wrong action or is it their anger? It's their anger. And so whenever we use the anger of man, it does not produce the righteousness that God requires. My feelings should not be the factor that decides if I punish or how much I punish. The wrong action is what the children need to understand. They should understand that I'm in control of myself, and what I'm doing is not out of embarrassment or anger or fear. This is something that I'm doing for their good and their instruction. And I think that this is sometimes where we miss. When you punish out of anger, you train your child to avoid and respond to ambiguous levels of anger. Make sense? You know, there are some days where you could poke and you could poke and you're poked, and you would never get them to anger. And there's other days that you can poke once and then they just beat you. You know this. And whenever we act like this towards our children, they have no clear idea where the boundaries are. And this is where consistency comes in. Consistency is every time this happens, I'm going to correct. And consistency on the other end is every time this thing happens, I'm going to instruct. Every time the mother walked through the groceries line, she would turn her son's head away from them. Because if you are inconsistent on your training, if you say, well, some Sundays we're going to get up and we're going to sit still, and some Sundays we're going to stay home, or some Sundays I just can't deal with you anymore, take the phone, which so many parents do. We train them inconsistently, and they have no idea what is really, truly expected from them. I want to talk for a few minutes about errors in discipline, how people oftentimes, I think, do it wrong, how I have often done it wrong. Psalm 127 and verse 4. Psalm 127 and verse 4.
127:4. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth.
Error number 1, letting the children grow up without purposely training them in the right way. Arrows are arrows because they are straight, and you can point them in a direction and you can let them go on their own. How many times have you gone out into the bush and found perfectly straight pieces of wood? They are extremely rare. We call them hen's teeth. You never see a hen with teeth in it. It is so rare. So people who make arrows, they don't find perfectly straight pieces of wood. There's a whole set of processes that they take those wood through in order to make them straight. They may steam them and bend them. They may pressure them. They may put them into shaping devices. All of these things to make the arrows straight. What happens when parents they let their children grow up? We get up in the morning, they go off to school, they come back home, they go out into the streets with their friends, and then they go to bed, and we haven't trained them in any of the right things, and we don't discipline them against any of the bad things.
We allow the world to be the one to teach.
And how is the world? Is it straight?
No.
It's crooked.
So crooked.
This is the point. The biggest error, maybe the foremost error, is just letting the children grow up. keeping them healthy, keeping them in school, but never training them as we ought to. Sometimes we as fathers are too busy with work, teaching and preaching and secular work and all the stuff around the house and maintaining the car and taking care of the yard if you have a yard to take care of. We do all of these things, we get too busy to actually train our children. Number two is when discipline is ineffective. Some kids do not care about certain punishments. We mentioned this before. And we just keep doing the same thing over and over again because we haven't thought of another way to discipline. That punishment is ineffective. And some punishments just incite anger rather than training in a certain way. Number three, punishment is too much for the situation. We mentioned this already. Whenever there is a small infraction and we explode in our anger or we over punish. I won't ask for any specifics because I know far too many of them. But how hard is that whenever, do you have a memory in your mind where your mom or your dad or your aunties punished you so bad for something that you thought was not that bad or you thought you were right in? But Prince, you're in your 40s. Peace, you're almost 40. And you can still, you can, oh, you're 25. Oh, but we remember this 30 years ago. This is how much it hurts us. This is how much it cuts us in the heart that we remember this even as middle-aged adults. Number four, punishment is lacking. This has become a very popular thing in today's society, where we think we can just talk to our kids and talk to our kids and talk to our kids. And every time they do something wrong, we just talk to them and talk to them and talk to them. And we forget exactly what Solomon says in Proverbs. If you do not discipline, you hate your child, and you are not saving them from Sheol. Number five.
Go ahead, Chris.
I'll just quickly say, if you're reading the literature from psychologists about children today, this is what they're teaching. Only talk, don't give them consequences. So we need to be warned about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like what you're saying, these days, if you can speak out loud that you spank your child or discipline your child in that way, you looked upon as you don't love your children or you too backwards thinking and stuff like that. Like it's the thing is not done anymore. That's not how you show love. You rather like what Dennis saying, rather speak to the child and stuff like that. But anyway, maybe it works somewhere, but anyway, it doesn't work for me.
It does work. We're trying. It's an experiment, and it's going to have disastrous results.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but I didn't want to like that. I think, like we touched on this, we should never get tired of discipline. Whether I work full time or I whatever the case, whatever that occupies me, stuff like that, and I come back home, I'm tired or stuff like that. If something needs to be dealt with, it needs to be dealt with. And it needs that consistency, like you mentioned. I shouldn't say that no, I'm tired of sleeping in the morning one night. Like they need to see that consistency and that okay, if I do something like this, there's going to be repercussions for that. But again, having done that as well, it needs to be. I'm saying that a little bit out of experience as well. It needs to be balanced with love. So at the same time as you putting that the discipline, there has to be that love again to show that. If for me, what happens is as much as how can I put it? When I discipline, mine is always they always know that it's numbers. Like for this certain thing you get 5, or for this certain thing you get 10. Lying is the biggest. then you get the biggest punishment. But it's again, like you said, it depends on your age and stuff like that. But the whole point is that it needs to be consistent. Whether I'm tired or something like that, if he has told a lie, that's more important because that needs to be resolved immediately because so that he knows and understands and goes. I might not get that opportunity again to try and instill those values in him and stuff like that. But as much as I do that, there was a time that I used to do that always because I was always working, and I could see that it started making, especially PJ to when he sees me, he'll be scared.
Mhm.
So now, like, that's where now the love needs to come in, like, okay, maybe I should also play around with them, have fun with them and stuff like that. But now they know that, okay, our father is strict and there's certain things that they need to be done a certain way, but he plays around with us. He also makes them. Faith, on the other hand, she doesn't play a lot with them, but she has a way of also making that and stuff like that. So that also they're just trying to find that balance as well, because what doing, if I just love them more and not discipline, it will make from them turn out another way. But if I don't just discipline them all the time, it'll also make them to be scared of me. So that balance is also necessary.
Yes, and we're gonna get there in just a few moments. I'm glad that we're thinking the same way though. I really appreciate that. Another problem with discipline or times where discipline, we have errors in discipline is that we punish without instruction. Sometimes we become the individual who just comes home and just yells at everybody who's doing all the things wrong, but they didn't know it was wrong in the first place because we never took the time to train them in the right way. Number 6 is when we punish out of anger, as we've talked about. We train them for the wrong thing. And then number 7 is the inconsistencies in either our teaching or our punishment. Times where we give out the rules and then we allow them to break the rules. And then other times where we punish for the rules and we don't let them know what is clear. We give an indistinct noise where they don't know if what they're doing is right or wrong. And they have a hard time knowing what is right or wrong because we do not lay out what is right or wrong clearly for them. Consistency is one of the key things. Always, always, always. You always hold fast to what is true. You always denounce the things that are wrong. And we'll talk about some ideas how to balance some of those things a little bit. The New King James, or the New King James and King James in Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4 says to bring them up in the nurture of the Lord. This is where we talk about training and discipline needs to be balanced with nurture or love. Psalm 103 in verse 13, it is not an instruction on how parents should be, but it is a statement of how parents are. And so by making a statement of how fathers are, it does become an instruction of how we ought to be. He mentions in Psalm 103 in verse 13, as a father shows compassion to his children, so the Lord shows compassion to those who fear him. He knows our frame and he remembers that we are but dust. There is a compassion and understanding and a care that goes along with discipline. And we need to be those who balance the love that we have with the instructional love and the discipline love. You know, and mothers and fathers show this differently. There's all kinds of things that I do with my kids that my wife just has no interest in. And there's other things that she does with our kids that I just have no interest in. And that's fine. The way that fathers bond with their children is different than how mothers bond with their children. That's good and right. But we have to do something to gain this relationship, to work to be someone who is compassionate and caring and understanding. Sometimes we get to the point we get good at pointing out the errors and the wrongdoings of our children. We are so focused on training and instructing and disciplining that we then become people who fail to commend the things that are. This is one of my big failings. I feel like I'm hyper focused on helping them out and the areas that they need to do right and the areas that they have done wrong, that I forget to be vocal about the good that they do. And I'm very glad that my wife is very good at this. And so she begins to say, oh, yes, I get to join in with her. But we need to balance that out. We need to be someone who brings them up in the nurture of the Lord. Yes.
If I can just offer
Sure.
an unsolicited piece of advice. First thing every morning, say something loving or encouraging to your children. Changes the rest of the day. Makes the discipline much more effective. And before they go to bed at night, something encouraging, something you're proud of, something that you love about them.
It's a great piece of advice. The next thing he mentions in Ephesians 6 verse 4 is fathers, do not provoke, or the very first thing actually is do not provoke your children to anger. This doesn't mean that you're never going to make them mad. As a child, I remember being mad at my parents and thinking, they broke God's commandments. They made me mad. That's not what he's talking about. It means that we're not harsh with them. That we're not doing it out of anger or out of spite. We're not punishing them as retaliation for those things. We are not overly demanding. There are things that are going to be just too much for someone who is very young. It's going to be too much sometimes for someone who's going to be very occupied with matric. There are some things that we can just put too much on them at one time, and that becomes insightful. That also means it's not hypocritical. If I'm the one who comes home after my long day at work and I sit on the couch and I start to instruct my kids, you need to go help out in the house, you need to go do all the yard work, you need to be the one who helps out the old lady carrying all the stuff, and they never see me doing it. Or I tell them, you need to be kind and thoughtful, and they find that I'm unkind and unthoughtful. That's hypocritical, and that's going to incite them to wrath. It's not belittling or demeaning to the kids. There are sometimes where they walk up, aren't you just stupid? Don't you know better? Haven't your mom ever taught you? Some fathers talk like that to their children. Part of the problems that we have as men, one of the natural tendencies, is we like things to be done right and well and prompt. So one of the reasons that it tends to make us good workers, we're going to be hired to do a work because there is this somewhat natural tendency in us that we are going to show up and we're going to do a job, and we're going to do a job well, and hopefully going to do it in a timely manner because we want to see progress. We like things be done well. There's a reason that we usually hire men as managers to manage over people to get them to do the job. And then we come home and we see these kids who are young. Why haven't you grown up yet? Why haven't you done this right yet? And we have this demanding nature to us, which in very many aspects is a good service to us. But sometimes in homes, we over-demand and we over-insist, and we become someone who is a inciter of wrath rather than someone who is instructing and disciplining and nurturing. All right, those are my main things from here in Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4. Before we move on, are there any thoughts about the provoking to anger, the bringing up in discipline and nurture?
If I can just add, I think you touched a little bit about this. Like, I think also when I think most of us have daughters and sons. And there's this thing whereby we see when a child does something, maybe especially maybe a young girl or a girl child, she acts out a certain way or something like that. And most of the time you find that parents laugh it off, or they just take it as minor, it's still a child and stuff like that. But what we not noticing is that we're missing an opportunity to train that person or help that person grow up into the woman that she's supposed to be. If she's growing up with an attitude of always wanting to compete, which is good, but always wanting to be the best, maybe you find that she's always telling on the brother or disrespecting the brother or something like that. And we just left it off as like one day that girl will have a husband and she'll do the same to that husband. She'll always try to be over the husband, or when the husband is maybe slow in some aspects, she will try to overcharge or overcome and stuff like that, and disrespect, because those are things that were left off while she was so young, and they were left off and saying, no, she's still a young girl and stuff like that. Oh, this person has certain character and stuff like that. And I think that's an opportunity for parents to see also. My goal is to help my child grow to become the person who will be able to, whoever that they get married to, be able to help each other get to heaven. If she's a woman, you need to submit, but even in the submission, do it in a way that shows respect, and encourage the husband as well as much as you can. But if I'm leaving that and saying that no, it's my child, she has the kind of character and stuff like that, then I'm not doing any good when she goes out. The same goes for the young man. If the young man is maybe reserved and not, how can I put it? Simply put, what I'm trying to get to is that one day that young man will have to be a man who will have to go and marry another child from another family and be with that woman and need to take care of that woman and his household and stuff like that. If I don't use the opportunity while I have it to try and help him so that one day he becomes the man that the wife will be proud of, and the wife, the kind of leader that will be able to stand for his family and take care of his family, then it's me missing that opportunity now because I'm just looking at them as my children and then giving them all the best that they need and everything. But I'm forgetting one thing, that these people are one day going to grow, and I need to teach them values to be able to stand one day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Okay.
I think Peace made some great points that are worth pointing out if we have the time.
Yep, we have an hour.
When they do things when they're little, you think about this thing that this little 3-4-year-old child has done. And then you ask yourself, how would that look if she was a teenager and I told her no and she treated me that way? Or her husband, or the boy. And if we don't address that when they're young, that will become the way they deal with us when they're older and deal with their relationships. And I think some of us miss those. I've missed a lot of those opportunities. We miss those opportunities to correct those things and to give them good training so that we point them down that right path you were talking about, instead of setting them up to just stumble along and harm their relationships. And yeah, that's an excellent point.
Training starts young in their attitude, in their actions, in the things, the habits that they're going to have. And it's hard work, especially when they're young. And it's so tempting to just send them out to play all the time. It's tempting to give them a device and distract them. It's tempting to just laugh it off and say they're kids. Teenage years in particular are usually known as the really hard years of parenting. But I've had a few parents who have told me that if you put the work in young, the teenage years can be some of the very best years. They're now able to have full conversations with you and reason through things. You get to see all that they're becoming and you get to help them in those things. They're just joyous years. We are now at the point with both of our kids where we have put in years of hard work. And a lot of our friends now have children who are younger than ours, who are in the 5 to 10 year range, or 3 to 14 year range. And they're working through all of those really hard grades, and they're putting in the time now. And we have watched our daughter in particular, who has grown and grown and grown and grown. And she has become just a delight. There's still days where she has a hard time with her anger, where she's still working on how to respond with respect. But looking back 3 years ago, and some of the really hard struggles that we have that we don't have. I haven't had to spank either of my kids in years, partly because it's no longer the discipline that they need, but partly because they have just become so much better kids, because we put in all of that time when they were younger, so that now that they're growing older, we're able to have better conversations. We're able to instruct better. We've trained, focused them so that they hear us better on the instruction, because sometimes we put the work in early with the discipline. And it's been wonderful. And I like to encourage the younger parents that if you keep working at it, and if you put the time in now and you're consistent now, the things do get better. I'm sure you're feeling a lot the same way.
Yeah, can I give a very specific example? We've all heard of teenagers that their mother asks them to go do something. It's a chore around the house, go run an errand, whatever. And the teenager just almost has an emotional meltdown. And maybe that looks like just moping and complaining and grumbling and shuffling their feet when they go to do it. But that's an emotional meltdown. If the father in that household, passing through the house when the child was 5 or 6 years old, saw that 5 or 6 year old say something disrespectful to mother, when mother says, "I insist that you do this," and the child acts disrespectfully, the father needs to step in and say, you will respect me and your mother. And that trains the child at 5 or 6 years old, so that you don't have to deal with that stubborn, rebellious, now powerfully disobedient teenager. And so that's an important principle.
I think that's part of that idea of you train along a path, and as you get further down that path, whatever is instilled in them becomes stronger. If it's good character, that good character becomes stronger. If it's good behavior, it becomes stronger. If it's poor behavior, it gets stronger.
I don't know if it's the same with you in the States as well, but down here when I was growing up, there's always been this stigma that is associated that when a child gets to the age of adolescence, they just act out to complete rebellion. And it's something that it has become a norm, and it was even engraved in some words whereby like we've been scared that okay, I'm still even scared that as those years coming. Because I think but I'm trying to fight as much as I can so that at least it doesn't turn out that way, because it's engraved in me to say that apparently when a child gets to a certain age, they just rebel. But I think also it also reminds me of something that once someone was told. You said that when you get a child, it's an empty tape recorder, like an empty cassette. And with that empty cassette, I don't know if you see, there's no one younger here, but I think we all know what cassettes are. So when you get an empty cassette, you decide what you want to put in that cassette. It doesn't come with anything. If you want to put hip hop, or you want to put gospel, or hymn book, whatever that you want to put, it's up to you. That's what a child's mind is. Or when you get a child who has nothing. You need to now go and decide, what do I feel in that mind, in the character and stuff like that. And what you feel in that is what will play out when people play it and look at it and stuff like that. So it also gets me want to think that when we have a child, what I expose that child to, the kind of area that I live in, the kind of friends I allow the child to associate with, the kind of things that I allow him to watch, could be on TV or whatever the case might be, especially nowadays with social media and all this. So if I do not make the time to make sure that I teach him and I make him know about life, he will not hear it from me, but he will hear it from everything else that I'm exposing him to. He will understand what the measure of success is from the world. He will understand what we're supposed to take as priority from the world. His career decisions, his life decisions will be influenced by the things that I've exposed him to, because I'm allowing somebody else to feed that empty cassette instead of me taking the time and the sacrifice to make sure that I fill in the cassette so that it grows up to be someone that puts God first.
Yeah, great point. Great points. I have a fairly lengthy list of other thoughts on parenting, a lot of advice that I've been given over the years. Not all of them have a specific verse to go to them. They are, I think, largely very sound biblical things, but the wisdom comes from Scripture. The wisdom comes through instruction, but not always a specific verse on parenting concerning this subject. Number one is seek advice, and seek a lot of advice. That our children are empty cassettes, and we as parents oftentimes are sometimes damaged cassettes. The model that we had of parenting is not great, or is not perfect, and that the modeling for what it looks like to be a parent is not something that we automatically know as soon as we become a parent. So seek advice, and I mean not just for children in general, but this child in particular. And not just this child in particular, but this child through different stages of their life. Now, we have 2 children, and they are night and day, boy and girl, hot and cold, black and white. They are as different as you can imagine them to be from one another. And what we thought we knew with one, we had no idea with the other one. What we are expecting and ready to do, we didn't know what to do. And so we've had to ask for advice on, here's this situation with this child, here's a problem that we're dealing with now. How do I instruct? How do I teach? How do I do this? And there's all kinds of tips that we have picked up from other parents that we would never have thought of, but have been just perfect for the things that we were dealing with. So seek advice, seek a lot of it, and seek advice through different stages of development, recognizing that As they grow, there will be more things that you have to fill them with. Number two is spend a lot of time with your children. I don't know how I can get through Proverbs and all of the things that a father is to instruct his child, or Deuteronomy chapter 6, all the things that are supposed to be taught and instructed when they rise and when they wake up, when they sit at the table, when they go on the way. All of those things require time. In Ephesians chapter 5, Paul tells us to redeem the time. Look carefully how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, redeeming the time because the days are evil. The ESV uses the phrase making the best use of the time, and I don't like that. I think redeeming is a better idea. When you redeem something, you buy it back. And our time is pre-sold. It's pre-sold whenever we bought a car and we know we have to go maintain. It's pre-sold when we buy a car and we know that we have to work to pay off the banknote. It's pre-sold whenever we have got hired by our employer and we have to be at work for 40 hours. It's pre-sold whenever we grab a phone and we download TikTok. It's pre-sold whenever we have WhatsApp and 1,000 people who contact us on a daily basis. And we have to buy that back for the good things and the great things in life. We have to be able to turn off our phones and sit down at a Bible study or sit down with our family at dinner and not answer the phone 15 times. We have to buy it back so that we are engaged with them in their recreational time. So we know our child, so we can instruct. We have to buy that time back from all of the other things in life so that we have time to maybe play games, or we have time to go and take walks or holidays with them, or other things, because that is our responsibility. And so here in Ephesians 5, we need to redeem the time because the days are evil. That it's going to be sold our time is sold doing things that are wasteful, unhelpful, unbeneficial. And even our children's time is going to be filled with things that are going to instruct them in the wrong way. So spend a lot of time with your kids. Number 3 is have a lot of open communication with them. To instruct, you have to be able to talk to them. And I know that some cultures are different, that talking between the generations can be difficult, that there's this cultural expectation of not being able to answer back or not to be able to communicate. But we are called out. We are a people who are called out. And oftentimes that means we are called out of our culture, not to be like the world around us, but to be like God and his instructions for us. We need to talk to our kids. Talk to them whenever we sit in the house, whenever we walk along the way. One of the things that made a big impact on me growing up, as I think about what it was like to be instructed by my parents. Our commute from our house to our church building was about 30 minutes. We did that on Sunday mornings, we did that Sunday afternoons, we did it Wednesday evenings and Wednesday nights, 4 times a week, 2 hours a week. We had nothing other than to sit in the car. We could have turned on the radio, we could have listened to the news, we could have done all of our own things with our own devices. But my parents used that time largely to talk to us about things that were happening in our lives. As we were coming back from services, we would discuss the Bible classes and the sermons. My father in particular pushed us as children to question the preacher. Here's the things that we're taught. Did he prove his point? Is he right? Oh, question, here's the teaching. What does Scripture say? Reason through that together. And sometimes as a family, we came to the conclusion the preacher was wrong. And then we got to have that study on the way home. But it got this habit of us, when I hear something, I have to hear it, not just to accept everything, but to process this, to reason through it, to figure out if it's right or wrong. And that came with a lot of open communication. My father likes to hike. And oftentimes, whenever he wanted to talk to us about something going on in life, or he thought that we needed to learn something at this new stage of life that we were at, he would say, grab your shoes, we're going to go hiking. And we would hike through the hills of West Virginia, and he would talk the whole time. Number 4, be willing to be wrong and apologize. As we're looking at Ephesians 6:4, where we do not provoke our children to wrath. What happens whenever we do the wrong thing and then we act like we didn't do it?
Teaching them to be arrogant, not to apologize.
Yeah, we're teaching them to be like us, but also inciting them. How hard is it to handle when someone does something wrong to you and then they just act like nothing was wrong? It's difficult. And we're not going to get it right all the time. We're not going to be perfect. We're going to say the wrong things. We're going to discipline out of anger sometimes. We're going to instruct them in the wrong way. And we need to be willing to turn around, to admit our wrong to them, and ask for their forgiveness and change. Number 5, include them in your work. Part of someone who is learning from somebody else, you have to be with them, to learn with them. As you're working on the car, as you're going to Bible study, as you're sitting down with somebody else, include them in those things. Allow them to watch whenever it's appropriate for them to watch. Allow them to participate when it's appropriate for them to participate. Let them take the reins sometimes and try things out for themselves. Not just in biblical matters, but in all aspects of life. Let them try. Number 6, take time to allow them to learn alongside you, which is very, very close to include them in. But that means you're going to allow this to take longer, that you're going to be in a rush, that you're wanting things done well and you need things done right. There's going to be some times where if you have your children take care of your yard's going to be a mess. But they try, and you need to congratulate them on trying. And you need to say thank you for doing your best. And then the next time, we're going to do a little bit better. And I'm going to let you try. And we have to sometimes be okay with our car being washed poorly sometimes in order for them to learn the skills that they need to learn. The next one is don't be harsh with yourself as you figure it out. And boy, is this one a hard one for me. In all aspects, there is an understanding that none of us are going to get it right. And none of us are going to be perfect in all that we do. And I need to be reminded that I'm still trying to figure out how to be a dad. And I need to give myself some leeway in that. Not licensed to be wrong, but if I am overly harsh on myself, that can then turn into anger that is misplaced on the children or misplaced on the wife. I need to be able to handle my own mistakes with grace. In Philippians chapter 3, Paul specifically here is mentioning the idea of leaving all of what might have been in the past and all of his past failures in the past in order to move forward. He mentions here, as we look in verse 8, Philippians 3:8, indeed, I count everything as loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Jesus Christ, my Lord. For his sake, I have suffered the loss of all things, and I count them as rubbish in order that I may gain Christ, to be found in him, not having a righteousness that is, I'm thinking of verse 12, sorry. Verse 12. Not that I have already obtained this, or that I'm already perfect, but I press on to make it my own, because Jesus Christ has made me his own. Brothers, I do not consider that I have made it my own, but one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and pressing forward to the goal for the prize of the upward calling of God in Christ Jesus. For a while, I wondered if Paul was just bad at math. He mentions he does one thing, and then he says, these are the two things that I do. But these go hand in hand. And sometimes to go forward and to be successful in the things that you need to do, it is the same as leaving behind the things that went wrong in the past. For Paul, it was what might have been in his Jewish life. It was the sins that he had committed that lied in the past. And if Paul just beat himself up all the time about how terrible he used to be, he was never going to move forward to be the useful servant of God that he became. And the same thing goes for us. The specifics of Philippians 3 doesn't apply to this, but the principle of leaving things behind to press forward does. We need to be not harsh with ourselves as we figure things out. The next one is be patient with them. Remember that they're growing and allow them to do so. We mentioned already that there sometimes is a tendency for us as fathers to be overly harsh, to push for things to happen quicker. And we need to remember that children take a long time to grow up. And there's times where they are kids. And it's okay for them to be kids. And it's okay for them to be working on this, and that working on it may take months or years for them to do it. But be consistent. Be consistent with it, but be patient with them in this process. The next one is don't give up. Keep working on yourself and keep working on them. I've seen parents who have started this process. They've determined, I'm going to start teaching, I'm going to start correcting, and they put in the work for a week, 2 weeks, or for a month, and at the end of that month, they feel exhausted, and they don't feel that they've really made any progress. Why have I wasted all this time and all this energy for a month, and I feel worse at the end of the month, and nothing's better at home? And they quit. Do you guys do New Year's resolutions? The beginning of January, you're going to do something new for the year. How long does that last?
A few months.
A few months. Almost all gyms make the majority of their money in January. I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to work out. And after 6 weeks, people look at themselves in the mirror and they say, I've gotten up, I've gone to the gym all these every day, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I'm sore, I'm sweaty, and I look the same. It's not doing anything, and they quit. You know how long it takes for results to really start showing up for gym exercises? Usually about 90 days. Results become visible to you and to somebody else, usually after about 3 months, like real noticeable gains. But people stop a month and a half in, and they don't push through until they start to see results. And sometimes we feel, I'm working on this, and I'm working on this, and I'm working on this, and things aren't changing, and maybe I'm just going to give up on this. Our daughter, whenever she was small, we had some real struggles with her behavior. And it felt like for years that we were not getting anywhere. And then there was a particular day where we had a very bad meltdown. And we had to spend a very large portion of the day in discipline. And then the sun rose the next day. She woke up and things were different. And they weren't just different for that day, they were different from that day on. Didn't mean that she didn't have struggles, but her whole attitude had changed overnight. And there has been successive days after that where it seems that things aren't making any progress, and we've been stagnant for months. And then something changes. And from then on out, she does better in that area. And so for her, sometimes growth isn't a linear path. It is a steady plateau, and then large success, and then steady plateau, and then large success. That's how some kids are. But if you're not consistent, if you're not patient, if you are not steadfast through those times, you're not going to see the success, and you're going to give up too soon. Keep working on yourself. Keep working on them. Don't give up. And the next one is hard. I want you guys' feedback on this one. Pick your battles, and then don't give up on the things that you have picked. there are some things that kids are just kids. And they're not worth the effort. They're either going to grow out of them over time or it's not going to be important anyways. One of our children wanted to dress themselves how they wanted to. And they would pick out their clothes and we'd think, they don't look right. They mismatched everything. This is play clothes and not going out to other stuff clothes. And it was just an argument after argument after argument over argument. And I told my wife, I don't think that this is the battle for us. This child is 5 or 6 years old. It doesn't matter to them what they look like. It doesn't matter to anybody else what they look like right now. Let them take out their clothes now. And then whenever they get old enough, someday they'll go, oh, this isn't how I should dress. They'll decide for themselves a little later on to dress in accordance. That was the choice that we made. And somewhere around 12, 13, our child one day decided, probably don't want to wear a tutu with my pants and my dress shirt. It's my daughter, if you haven't figured it out. It wasn't my son. But that was a battle that I didn't think that was what needed to happen. That the clothes wasn't the important thing at that moment. They were modest, and that's all that I mattered. So he chose not to push that one. But there's other ones that I couldn't bend on. I couldn't bend on how they react to their mother. I couldn't bend on them not doing their chores. I couldn't bend on so many things, how they acted at church, whether they brought their devices to church. Those things I couldn't bend on. But there are some things that even other parents will look at you and think, well, why are you allowing this to happen? And you and your wife have decided this isn't the battle for today. And this maybe isn't a battle that we're going to have, not just today, but moving forward. What are some of your experiences? Have you guys had to pick those battles?
I'm just thinking, I don't know if, I'm thinking when you did that, that idea of codes, with our experience is a bit different because I think from a very young age, we emphasize the idea of dressing modesty. But I think that's also what you mentioned. And what happens is that it's now, I don't know, maybe we overdid it. But the thing is, especially with our daughter, she actually, how can I put it? She tries, but she wouldn't catch a dead dressing any other way. So she, even if like would even buy clothes or something like that, she would say, I don't want that, I want this, something like that. If she was wearing her PJs, for example, and a car pulled over, she would quickly go and change and come back, or something like that. Or to some extent, I don't want to. She would actually tell my mom, I don't think that's modest. So she now on another level, sometimes we even when we dress, scared of more of her. Because we know that she will really criticize and say that that is not proper, that you're not dressing properly and sort of modest enough or something like that. And that's something that has come over. But in terms of I don't know, maybe then you might have something to do with winning battles and stuff like that. I don't know. Maybe I set up a boot camp too much where they
I don't remember much, but one thing that I actually know is that my wife is, she becomes when a child is doing something wrong, she will be the first to react. It's either she's going to respond to the child by going to the child and deal with the child, or she will actually come to me and tell me what the child has actually done. And most of the time when I look at it, I realize that no, this is not, he has done something wrong, but this is not the battle I should be involved in. It's not something big. But usually women are very emotional. I don't know if men are the same, but women are emotional beings, and men, they are the other way into something. So you end up realizing that she takes everything serious and she wants to respond. She wants to do the dealing with the issue fast. But whereas the child at that time, you only need to look at it and see, yeah. I had something in my mind and it's slipping. But one thing that I've actually seen is a child you always rebuke. Even when you are now looking at something serious and you're doing it's no longer effective. So you need to learn as a parent to choose your battles because not every time if you just say ga 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 every time, she become used to the ga 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 baba father. Yeah, something like that.
I think when Prince is saying that, I'm starting to see what he's saying. I think in our situation, it's a bit different.
Mm.
I think Faith is the more one that, I think she's the one that chooses battles. And I'm in this case, I think I'm more like Prince's wife. Whereby everything that happens, I see it as an opportunity to correct for the future. I'm always looking for the future. I'm always looking like, how do I want this person to be in the future? How can I assist them while I have the opportunity now? Before they get to that point whereby I can give advice and they can choose whether they take my advice or not. But right now, I'm trying to help them to be able to embed that they always try to make the best decision as possible as they can. So I think when it comes to that, I'm more like Prince's wife. And Faith, I think that's why maybe it's not taking in. But for Faith, if Faith was here, she would be saying, yes, I do know there's some battles that you don't have to engage in yourself, because I think she's the one that will say, no, I think this it's not what, because maybe she'll allow me maybe to do the discipline and then instruction. And then later on, when we are together, then she'll say to me, okay, I think when you did that, maybe you shouldn't have done it that way. You should have done it maybe this way because of this and this and this. And then that actually helps me because then I get out of the room now. And then I say, now I have to try and make sure that I think, in other words, try to show that, okay, I think I might have made a mistake. Maybe I acted not the way that I should have acted, stuff like that. So I think in that regard, I think she's very good in helping me. She's the one that chooses the battles, and then she then helps me to choose those battles. But if it was up to me, I don't think I would choose the battle.
Yeah, and I think my wife and I kind of share that responsibility sometimes, and she helps me a lot whenever she thinks I've overstepped. She does that privately, and that helps me then go back and apologize.
Proverbs 23 and verse 26 says, "My son, give me your heart and let your eyes observe my ways." Proverbs 4 and verse 20 says, "My son, give attention to my words and incline your ear to my sayings." Proverbs is the book which teaches us about disciplining our children. If there's any book in the Bible that does it, it's Proverbs. And Proverbs says it's a matter of getting the child to pay attention to the words that will help them getting their heart. And we have to think about it for a minute from the perspective of a child who doesn't have a lot of life experience, doesn't have a lot of knowledge, doesn't have a lot of understanding. And if I am constantly sending them in several different directions for correction, they don't know what to pay attention to. I'm not effectively getting their attention and getting their heart. And so some days we have to pick, this is the thing we're going to work on today with this child. And we will not neglect these things. We will come back to them at an appropriate time. This is the priority today. And once we've gotten the child's heart to pay attention to what's right about this issue, we can work on these other issues. That's very different from saying, well, I just don't want to be overbearing, and so I'm just going to let things go. But if we think about it from the perspective of the child, are they overwhelmed, or can they focus on what I'm trying to teach and instruct? I think that helps us pick our battles.
Yeah, I guess in the instances I'm thinking about, it's not things that are character based. There are things where I have to step back and say that this isn't going to change who they are as a person. We're not dealing with spiritual matters. We're not dealing here with them being a good kid or a bad kid. But it's maybe things that as a parent, I want to be controlling over. I want to control how they dress. I want to control one of the battles I've had to pick over the years is trash in the car. That one drives me crazy. Doesn't bother my wife at all. And to me, it's been, why not, whenever you leave the car, grab the trash, throw it away. And yet it stays in the car. And that's me. I have to back up and say, that's me being controlling sometimes. But now that they're older, my wife and I had the conversation recently, okay, it's time now for us to begin this process of training. When they were young, that wasn't something I was going to be controlling over. Now I'm going to teach them to keep what they have clean and nice and presentable. But, so I think, yeah, Dan.
Yeah, can I say something about the clothing? No, I can't, I don't remember. It's my mind. Sorry.
For my wife, she wanted our kids to be cleaner. She didn't always want them to go out and play and get dirty outside. And that was one of those battles that I picked and said, this is not one we're gonna fight with the kids. We want them to go be kids. We'll deal with the clothes later. We'll deal with the dirt later, but. So back and forth, we had to pick out what's gonna be really worth making rules on and what isn't worth making rules on.
There is this thing this thing of picking up the battles. In the book of Daniel, chapter 1, we read about the young men who are now, number one, their names are changed. Number two, their food is rationed. That they have to eat this certain food.
Yeah, the choice.
Yeah,
And they don't
so-
get to choose the food.
They chose their battles, these young men, and they realized that no, this is not worth it. But this one, this can actually affect us, but not that much.
Mm.
But this will affect us and also affect our relationship with God. So they chose their battles. In life, someone has to value what is it that is actually worthy for me to talk about.
Mhm.
What he's doing right now, what is it affecting? Is it affecting his future? Is it affecting his spirit? How is it going to impact? And that's when you will actually start knowing, do I need to be involved or not?
Mhm.
And that will actually help.
The next one I have on my list is be willing to change your ways or your method or your rules if you realize that they're not good. There's sometimes we make a rule for our children and we come back later and think, that probably wasn't right. And sometimes I think, well, because I've laid down this rule, I can't change it. Well, that's one of the joys of being the boss, is you get to go back and you get to change it. Sometimes it's the method. How do I talk to them? How do I discipline them? How do I instruct them? And sometimes our wives are really good at saying, maybe not. Maybe we need to go back and change this. And if we are unwilling, if we are unyielding in what we have done, then we're not going to be adaptable to meet their needs as they grow up and as they wind through life. The next one I have comes from 1 Corinthians. Yes,
What is
please.
the next one? There are two things, if not more than two, pertaining changing how you're parenting, your approach of things. You realize that this thing is not working, and you need to come up with another way of disciplining. When I grew up, the only way that worked was them working on you. And because I noticed that that worked for me, I think it will actually work for my children. Number two, you have got more than one child, and this method is working for him. And you also want that method to work for him, and it's not working. You see? So what I've realized about these two things is that you increase the dose. You think because this is not working, it is because the dose it needs 500 milligrams, not 250. You increase the dose. Now, if it is about spanking, you change, you work harder. Yes, you work harder. And that's what most of the parents do.
Mhm.
We don't change strategies. Actually, she needs to change, he needs to change, not me. So who's the boss here? So we increase the dose rather than changing, not acknowledging that each and every child is different and dealing with them differently.
Yes.
Well, can I also just, I'm sharing about the dose and I think also, at every level of the child's growth, obviously the medicine, since it's talking about dose, needs to also change a little bit. Because like I'm thinking when they were younger, we started by letting them know and they understand that there's the word no, that you don't always get what you want. So that they understand that no, I think from really like still months old and stuff like that. But it was important for them to understand and associate that when their mom says no, or when someone says no, it means that they dislike what they do, they shouldn't do something like that. Then as they started becoming a bit of toddlers and stuff like this, then obviously you try to find something that just brings a little bit of discomfort. Obviously, you're not going to take it, expecting it for it to, but it's just something to bring discomfort and associate that no with this is not right. Then when they maybe get to 5 years and stuff like that, then you bring maybe something that at least will bring again that something to use and stuff like that. But then we used to have this do something, I don't know. But we use that, and that and as soon as they got to the ages of 8 or 9, we saw that that thing is not effective anymore. I think we were using more effort and we were getting more tired, but it was not serving the purpose. Then we had to change and find something that will still carry out the job. We usually call them, they have names. And then we just say, whenever we call that person, he's just coming to help us correct the behavior. So they have names. There's the blue banda, then there's whitey now. So they all have names. They know that if we're speaking about whitey, okay, I think this needs whitey to come out. So when that comes in, out, he's coming to help with this certain. So we'll start that by having a conversation. So it usually starts with a court whereby everybody needs to understand why this is happening. So it's not a matter of just going out and then full blown. You need to first understand that, okay, this is the crime and this is the penalty. And it's something that was discussed previously. So it's not something new. If it was something new, then okay, maybe you would get a warning to say, okay, please in the future, if you do something like this, it's not good. But now you do it because you have the knowledge. That's why now, because you have the knowledge. If it's faith says, I beat until I'm tired. With me, I have numbers. You know that, okay, with Daddy, it's going to be how many, 10 for this or something like that, stuff like that. But at some point, there was a time, as children grow as well, there's a time that we also felt say, okay, put a money tree, for example. So, okay, you will lose something like that or certain. But again, that is to try and help them also start developing this thing of value, of having a sense of if I'm good, I can be able to get better rewards or something like that. But you also embedded that as well. It would work, but like he's saying, it would work on someone, but it won't work on someone. Then we have to change. And now that they're a bit older, you also now have to find something else. For us, maybe for example, I know many parents buy, for example, an Xbox, so that it's an entertainment for children, which it is. But for us, we're using it as an advantage again. For you to get that thing, you get to earn it on merits. You need to do certain things so that during the week and carry yourself, like do your chores in time, do this, that. Like there's a whole, everything that needs to be in bed in time, wake up in time, like all those things that will help that person become a better person. And if you do that throughout the week, then and you get all ticks for that, then it will open for you to be able to enjoy that Xbox for the weekend. If you don't, then it means that you. But we're using that because we see what at this age and at this stage, that's what they love most. Me coming with YT or having everything doesn't have that impact anymore. But the whole point is that you're embedding those things or those values. At the end of the day, I'm getting to you have those values instilled. So you just need to. I was thinking when he's talking about different doses at different doses.
Yeah, before we leave, you have to introduce Daniel to Whitey. We can see it with Whitey.
He stays locked up. He comes only when there's justice.
That's true. So we can use rewards as well. That's part of that discipline structure of training and teaching. It's not always punitive. It can be rewarded as well. And
Sometimes you talk about from Ephesians 6 and verse 4, the meanings of the two different words, and how half of the meaning of one of the words, right, is chastening, is physical discipline. Sometimes reward needs to be half of that, and explanation. So the reward paired with explanation,
yeah,
it can be effective too.
The next point comes from 1 Corinthians 15:33, I think a passage we all know well. Do not be deceived. Evil company corrupts good morals. We as parents need to keep a close watch over our kids' friends. And that doesn't inherently mean that they have to be from Christian families or Christian friends. Because there are some Christian kids that I just don't want my kids to be around. I don't want them to be the influence. Their attitude, their actions, their honor or lack of honor for their parents, those things blend over. Sometimes it's what their parents allow them to watch or their parents allow them to engage in that I don't want my kids to also engage in those things. Sometimes it is those who are outside of the church that we need to be mindful of. But we should know our children. I know several parents who have made some choices for their family that they have maybe a garage that they have and they have changed it from being a garage to being almost an entertainment place. Because their thought was, if my kids are going to have friends and they're going to do stuff with their friends, I want them to do it under my roof, where I know that certain things will not be happening around them. I know that there are parents who spend a lot of time with their kids' friends so that they get to know them and figure out whether or not they are good influences or bad influences. I know, we try to do that with our kids. We know who they are. We know enough about their parents to understand some of the things that those kids are exposed to. So we have an idea of what our kids may be exposed to when they are with them. And unfortunately, we just don't always pay attention to this as much as we should as parents. We are deceived, thinking that my influence as a parent can block them from all negative influences from other people. But yet, we should not be deceived. Evil company can corrupt the good morals that we instill on them. My very next point is to keep close watch on their devices. And one of the biggest influences is what they get to see. So our kids, they have pretty specific rules on device usage. They have a certain amount of time that they get a day. It's not a guarantee. If there's other things that take priority, if there's other things that happen, they understand that they may not happen. But they're limited to that time. This is the max that they're going to have. And they know that what they do is they go and they set a timer. And when that timer goes off, whatever they're doing, no matter where they're at, in a game or a conversation, it's going to be put away. And that's all they get. I mean, we've had other parents and other people who are even professionals tell us, you're too strict on this. And I said, okay, not your kids. This is what works for us. And we see the difference. If they have too much of this, their actions change, their behavior changes, their attitude is different. And so we keep tabs on that. All of the devices are unlocked, or if there is a lock because our daughter now is older and she now leaves the house, I have all of their passwords. I'm able to go in and I tell them, I will go look at your conversations that you have with your friends. I will be spying on you. This is not something that is hidden from them. They know that whatever they say is going to be something that is going to be examined. And so they have someone who's watching over their shoulders, that this thing is not a private device for them. It is something that is public for me to go through and look at, and I do. And so I control, there's locks that I put on them. There are certain things that they just cannot download. There are parental restrictions of websites that they cannot access. All that happens under my supervision. Doesn't mean it's perfect. Doesn't mean that I have complete control or they're not going to be able to hide things from me. But I do my best to keep a close watch on those devices so that I understand the influences that they have and understand what's going on. And then just my last point, since we're getting close to time, is don't compare your children to other children. Comparison is the thief of joy. I have an example in my mind. We go to a fairly large congregation. We have two families that have children about the same age. And one of the families, for whatever reason, all the kids are tall, they're skinny, kind of good looking kids. They excel in academia, they're good at sports, and they're very outgoing kids. And so at church, they always go around, they greet all the people. The parents have worked very hard for them to pay attention, not just to other kids, but to adults. And so their kids spread out through the auditorium and they go and they sit with some of the older people who are by themselves so that they have someone to sit with and they talk with them. And they do a good job with all those things. The parents have worked with those kids' personalities and gifts and talents, and they have been doing very well. The other family has very different kids. They look differently. They have different personalities. All their kids are good kids. I don't want to give this idea that one family is better than the other, but they're two different families with two different personalities. Their kids are more reserved. You know, they have some of their own things that they're really good at. But the one family always looks at the other family and says, my kids aren't like those kids. And I think it steals a bit of their joy. That, yes, those kids do these things really well. And sometimes they forget that these kids do their own things really well.
There is this verse, I'm trying to look at it from different angle. I may be wrong. On Proverbs 22 verse 6, which says, train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he's old, he will not depart from it. You cannot train all of them in the same way because each and every child is actually different from the other. Each and every child has a way he should go, which is actually different from the other child. It is just unfortunate that we as parents, we think they are my children, they are my children, they should be able to do the same. If the firstborn has done it, the secondborn ought to do it together with the last. But each child has a way he should actually go, and you should adjust as a parent of knowing how to deal with this one and how to deal with this one. And this will require a lot from you as a parent. It will require your time. It will require you to study each and every child. What is it that works? And which way can this, which way or with which I'm dealing, I'm looking at it, each child is different. And this child, I'm in a secular world, he will be an engineer. So which means I need to buy toys for this one. But this one, seemingly he loves, I'm looking at their path as a child. So I need to study and train and help them so that they can actually go through this. I'm just taking it that way.
Yeah.
I'm looking at each child being different.
Yeah. And I'll take that comparison one step further. Maybe I'm wrong or my feelings are different than other people's feelings. If you are a parent and you ask your kid, but Gia, why aren't you more like this other kid? Why aren't you like them? I don't know if there's anything that hurts more than that sometimes as a kid. I don't know if your wife has ever said that. Why aren't you more like this other person? I've had that done once, and like you complain about this person all the time. Why are you? Anyways, but we do that sometimes. I remember my mom saying, "Why aren't you more like your sister?" And I still remember that day all these years later, and not recognizing that we're different in that regard, and what she was good at, I wasn't, and vice versa. And so we help our kids with their shortcomings that are particular to them, and then we allow them to grow in the strengths that they have. Sometimes parents want something from their kid, and they push and they push and they push on a secular way of what needs to be done. I told Daniel that he has two boys, and he's split his personality between both of his boys. One of his boys likes to sit and to read and to study and to do stuff, engineering and math. And he's another boy who wants to go outside and survive in the woods and kill everything and skin it and wear it. I may be slightly overstating it, but
And make the knives himself.
Yes.
Yes.
But what if as a dad, he said, well, I want both of my boys to be outdoorsmen who are going to do this. And he doesn't nurture Sam in the things that Sam is good at. And he doesn't nurture Elijah in the things that Elijah is good at. He's going to ruin one of his boys if he doesn't train them up in the way that they go. If he compares one to the other, he will ruin both of them that way.
Yeah, I like the King James Version on Ephesians 6 verse 4 because the word for instruction and discipline in the other versions is nurture in the King James Version. And finding out what the child is interested in and what will be a good path for them in life and feeding that so that it can grow is part of a very important part of the work.
If you want your wife not to respond well, compare her to maybe your mom or to somebody. Let's say, for instance, I visited Majie. I realized that Majie's wife cooked meat differently, and you come home with that habit and style and whatever, and you tell her, no, that night you will eat at Majie's place. You go and eat at your mom's place. It's actually not good to compare someone with someone. It is actually very good to acknowledge where they are, and if you can help from there, not compare them with someone. You won't need, when she compare you to another man, you will never. It won't be good. So even so with our children, we need to be able to acknowledge or to know who they are and teaching them in that respect. There is a class which I taught in prison many years ago that talks about DISC, dominant child, influential child, supportive and cautious child. And this class taught me to be able to say, where does this person fall? Who is this person? Who is this boy? So if I understand his position, then I know how to help this person better. But we don't study as parents, and we don't care. Whatever that worked for him ought to work for this one. I will increase the dose.
Can you repeat the acronym again?
DISC, DISC, dominant child, influential child, supportive child, or cautious child. And each child has his own way. You don't appeal to the dominant the same way you will appeal to the cautious. You need to learn them and know that I need to talk to this one and this way. I can shout to Kato and Kato will respond. Then I shout to Rudi and Rudi throw tantrums. You shout to Nivu and he keeps quiet and does not know what to do. He becomes confused. You see, so knowing where they are and who they are helps you to penetrate.
One thing I will notice is you as a parent, you may not mean to compare, but the people in the congregation are the ones who are comparing the kids, or the kids will be with other kids, or they'll be saying things where you see that now there's this group and that group. I don't know how that's gonna end well or go well.
I meant to put on the list, I neglected to put it on the list, because this is the one that I'm gonna put on the list that is specific to teachers and preachers. This has been my ideas that I may be wrong about. But I refuse to allow the people of the congregation's thoughts to influence what I do. And it doesn't mean that I don't go and seek advice. But when they think, oh, their kid isn't as good as mine, or they're not doing this as mine does it, or if they're a preacher, their kid should be doing this. But that has no effect on me. And I've tried to shield our kids from, not from seeing them, but from them thinking that we are doing anything because we are comparing them to another child, or they're not living up to the expectations of the congregation. We do live in this fishbowl, as Daniel talked about, where because we are in front, everyone's going to be looking at us.
Yeah.
And there are some things that are going to be influenced by that. But the way that I treat my children is not based on what the congregation thinks that I should be doing or shouldn't be doing, but what I truly believe is best and scriptural for my kids.
Different circumstances have these effects on children. The preacher's children being the fishbowl. I'll give you my illustration. When I was a kid, I was fat, and the other kids made fun of me, and that hurt. So other people's comments can have devastating effects on our children. But there are things that we can do as parents to insulate and protect them against those comments. And it might depend on the different child. What was effective for me was I had a mother who would sit and listen to me. And she would take the time to respect what I was saying and then guide me, but she would listen. So it didn't matter to me as much what anybody else said about me because I knew that at home, they loved me. At home, they respected me. At home, they cared about me. And so if we're dealing with that kind of thing, we need to think about what does my child need and how can I insulate and protect them from those criticisms, those comments.
And I have not always done, I've not done great in so many things in parenting. But the one thing I think I have done somewhat good on is I've never told my kids, you're making us look bad in front of others. You are making other people not to hear or listen, that you are reflecting poorly on the family. That is not a pressure that I put on them. And I hope that I never put on them. They're gonna have their mistakes. They're gonna have their problems. They're gonna have their challenges. And I'm gonna have to face that with them in all respects, as any parent would. But I don't need to do that with the extra input of the congregation wants, or the congregation thinks, or you are being you're carrying the name of our family poorly. The extra does no good. It doesn't mean anything positive then. It usually only means something negative.
There's this thing wherein I was with Chad the whole day. Maybe I was with Chad or I was with Peace the whole day. Then you go back home and you start saying something that you saw that was actually wrong. And your wife says, did you see this, or you heard it from your friend, or you heard it from your parent, or you heard it from your siblings? Are you the one coming up with this? Or from that moment, I'm telling you, you know things are not going to go well at the end. You see, so comparing and all those kind of things are really, really not good. And yeah, so it's better not to take what other people say, because they may, once they realize that you don't have a spine to be able to lead them by yourself, you need other people. They will start hating even the people that come to visit, even your parents. When they come to visit, they will hate them, because when your parents leave, you're going to sit with your children and you're going to start, okay, then they will realize that, which means the problem is not our dad. The problem are the friends. The problem are the parents, the siblings that comes to visit. So now you have many problems at once.
Well, thank you all. I greatly appreciate the input, the thoughts. I hope that this has been beneficial for us to discuss this and think about these things. I think that's our time though for this morning. We will resume at 2 o'clock for Daniel's lesson, and he'll get to correct us on all the things we're wrong on that topic. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, everyone. We'll meet again at 2.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye and bye.